Arthur. Glad to have you here. Today our presenter, of course, is Dr. Arthur Schwartz, who is a professor of education and the founding director of the executive director of the Oskin Institute, a leadership institute here at Widener. I think all of us are aware that the Oskin family really wanted to have an impact and leave a legacy at the university. Come on, guys, come on up front. We have room. Come on. Please come forward, all of you. Just have a seat. Be comfortable. Come on up.
Let me ask out for it, just to make sure.
Well, thanks for being here today. As you know, the Oskin family made a generous commitment of $5 million to the university to create the Oskin Leadership Institute. And it was the desire of David Oskin and his family, Joellen, and now their late son David, that they wanted to leave a legacy of leadership at the university, which harkens back to our days as a Pennsylvania Military College and all the leaders that this university has produced, and even in more recent years. And I just want to point out, where's Rule? I thought I saw her in the room. Rule, you're here. Well, yesterday we had a wonderful presentation on someone who's actually lived out courage. And so, well, thank you for being here today in the School of Nursing. And so the Oskins wanted to have a commitment to leadership development at the university going forward. And to do that, we needed to find someone who brought a unique set of skills to the table. And we needed someone who understood leadership from a scholarly perspective, but also had a life of leadership and impact on his or her community. And after a national search, we were just so blessed to find Arthur Schwartz, who brings that experience to Widener. He's formerly a senior scholar for the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the United States Air Force Academy, where he served immediately before coming here. Prior to that, he has served as a senior executive of the John Templeton Foundation for 14 years. It's actually, in full disclosure, is where I first met Arthur, probably about 12 years ago, in that capacity. And he was a leading voice nationally on character development and the idea that colleges and universities could focus in this area. He's also widely known for collaborating with a number of other individuals, including Dr. Marty Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania in the field of positive psychology. His personal research focuses on adolescent moral development. Arthur's articles have appeared in a wide variety of journals and across the spectrum, including the Harvard Educational Review and the Journal of Moral Education. He received his doctorate in moral education from Harvard University, and he's also currently a senior fellow at the Center on Adolescence at Stanford University. And I think that Arthur, for all that he brings to the table in terms of leadership and the issues he's going to talk about today, this is a man who's deeply dedicated, loyal. When we interviewed, he said that one of the key things that he learned over his lifetime is how important loyalty is, and that manifests itself in no better way than his loyalty to his family. And I know, Victoria, where are you at? I heard that you were here today. Very Victoria, stand up. Let's give Victoria a round of applause. Arthur and Victoria have 2 children. I think Arthur also has some other family members here who want to welcome you today. And so please welcome Dr. Arthur Schwartz.
Well, first I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, my family, friends, and especially my Widener colleagues. Although I have never formally conducted research or published on the nature of courage, this talk is a bit of an intellectual homecoming for me. I began my doctoral studies looking at the construct of hope, or more precisely, the loss of hope in the lives of 14-year-olds in North Philadelphia. I could see in their eyes, literally in their eyes, a bleaching away of hope. And I went off to Harvard to understand how this could happen to physically healthy 14-year-olds, especially when I saw some of their friends persevering, showing grit, showing resilience. Yet many of these young people, whom I still see in my mind's eye today, lack the building blocks of what we will be talking about today. Let me begin by stating the obvious. Courage is a fuzzy construct. It lacks a universally agreed upon definition, and for those who are empirically minded, I believe only two validated instruments have been developed, and both of those are relatively recent contributions to the field. On the other hand, courage is ubiquitous. It's widely talked about. It's universally held in high regard. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that it's one of the three pillars underpinning, sort of undergirding the Oskin Leadership Institute, along with character and the competencies of leadership. My goal for today is to boldly go where many have gone before, into the mystery of the virtue we call courage. I'll begin by pointing out the landmarks of those who have taken the journey before us. For example, the ways in which philosophers and others have used the term. I'll share with you my own working definition of courage. Finally, I'll propose several potential lines of research or programs that our university might together, we might find ways to sort of increase humanity's knowledge, appreciation, and most important, practice of what Winston Churchill called the first of human qualities, the one that guarantees all the others. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge three people. First, John Peterson. Many of you know Colonel Peterson as he was commander of our ROTC program here from 2008 to 2012. John now works with me at the Oskin Institute, directing our executive leadership programs. John, where are you? Thank you for being the first person with whom I shared the ideas that I'll be discussing today. Second is Annalisa Castaldo, associate professor here at Widener and director of our Gender and Women's Studies program. I hope that's a good enough picture, Annalisa. Over a year ago, Annalisa and I talked about the courage of the Widener student, and we've had several conversations since. Again, it's my hope that our conversations and the ideas have been woven into this talk. And third, Dan Hartman. Dan is a business major, sophomore here at Widener, and a member of the first cohort of Oskin Leaders. He's also a devotee of Prezi. Thank you, Dan, for helping me create my first Prezi presentation. Finally, I dedicate this talk to Zach Ferrara, and I'll explain why a bit later. As we begin our tour into the universe of courage, let's begin by examining physical courage, specifically the courage of the soldier. This is the type of courage that runs through the writings of Homer and Aristotle, to the Romans and Cicero, all the way to St. Thomas Aquinas. There are two kinds of physical courage. One I call the courage to charge. This is the courage that has been defined as the military, since the phalanx of the ancient Greeks, all the way to Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. But this is also the courage displayed by firefighters, or the first responders during 9/11. And it's even the courage of the astronauts aboard Apollo 13. The charge is the ultimate test of courage. While many of us can imagine the courage to defend our family or our property, the courage to attack seems so much more daunting. This is the courage of Homer's heroes. Even Plato, ever the rationalist, suggested that courage is the ability to face fear and then stand and fight. But there is a second kind of physical courage, what I call the courage to endure. It's the courage of the POW, such as these men from World War II, or the courage that John McCain showed during his 5 years as a prisoner in Vietnam. It is also the courage of the soldiers who endure shell shock, the nightmares of trench warfare that was so brilliantly captured by Steven Spielberg in his movie War Horse. The courage to endure is what Aquinas was referring to when he talked about fortitude as a virtue. This temperament is much different than the temperament to charge. It is about suffering silently, with dignity. If it is fear that we have to overcome, to charge into battle. It is despair that we must defeat if we are to endure. But let me return for a moment to the courage to charge, more particularly to the context and the situation that formed the moral currency surrounding the men who comprised the phalanx. So for this, I'm going to need some volunteers. Who might I conscript to help me for this next part of the presentation? Sir, it looks like you would be a wonderful person. Your name?
Jared.
Jared, come and join me over here, right over here. I need a few more. Oh, excuse me. I need a few more. Don't worry, Viraga, I'm not going to call on you. Two more. Now, one thing we know about the phalanx, it was for men only back then. Only for men. Two, Professor Alvarez, thank you so much for your willingness to come and help out here. And one last man who is willing to support this cause. Lamar, I gotta choose you. Come on up. Even though you handed in your paper already, right? Okay, let's say, Lamar, you come right over here, facing this way, and right over here, and then right here. Actually, just turn out just a little bit like that. Okay, so what do we have here? We have the guys, we have on the right hand the spear. Why don't we put our left foot forward? Spear right here, and what's on the left side? The shield, right? By the way, what are those images of the shield right there? What do they represent? Does anybody know? Professor Lieberman, I knew you would know. What? The city-states, exactly. They represent the city-states. So you're representing 3 different city-states. Can we get the shield up? I mean, the shield on the left and the sword right here. And when I say something, left foot first like this, goes forward. When I say 1, 2, 3, and go. And one more time. And let's go back and do it again. Stay right like that. Now, what do we know about these men who joined the phalanx? What do we know about them? Well, let's ask this question. Why are they rare? Oh, gentlemen, please, we're in training. What do we know about them? What do we know about these men who have joined Homer's forces, Achilles? What do we know about them? Excuse me?
Firstborn sons.
Firstborn sons. Their firstborn sons are at home. They're not here. Their firstborn, very good. So Leonidas, he only took firstborn sons to be in his among the 300. Why? Why did he want to leave the firstborn sons home as they took these men? Does anybody know why? Because what happens if they ran? If they deserted? What would happen to the families of those men? Excuse? They would be shamed. So one reason they are here is because of their family, the honor of their family. What's another reason that they're here? Another reason, anybody can think of another reason that they're here? Who have they given their duty to? The different city-states. Gentlemen, together. Yes, Brett.
Well, they were socialized to fight suicidally and kind of put the needs of their city-state, I guess, over their own personal welfare.
Yeah, so they were socialized to do that. So the allegiance to the city-state trumped their own family, trumped their own sense of well-being. Okay? Gentlemen, up again. Are you in this alone? Who are you with? This has been at the core of the soldier from the beginning. It's not just about the city-state. It's not about the prevention, the fear of shame. It's also about those to your left and to your right. In fact, in these pictures, we know that the shield is actually there in part to protect the person next to you as well as yourself. And of course, come on in. I just want to say one thing as we go. I've been co-teaching with this man all semester, and he is my philosopher king. That's all I want to say. And so this notion that they are together, they're bound together, but they've also been trained. It's very important that they've been trained to do this. Up. And Brett, would you mind Because I thought when I was meeting with Annalisa, she gave me this poem, and I'd never heard it before, but it seems to really cover what this moment is about. Brett, would you mind slowly reading this poem from Richard Lovelace?
While holding the...
While holding it.
Tell me not, sweet, I am unkind, that from the nunnery of thy chaste breast and quiet mind, to war in arms I fly. True, a new mistress now I chase, the first foe in the field, and with a stronger faith embrace, a sword, a horse, a shield. Yet this inconstancy is such as thou too shalt adore. I could not love thee dear so much, love thou not honor more.
The courage of the soldier is built on this culture of honor, from Homer to today. Thank you, guys. Let's give them a round of applause. And now let's turn to moral courage. One type of moral courage is what I would call the courage to take a stand. It is the courage of the abolitionist, fighting to end slavery, or women fighting for their rights. This is the kind of courage that we understand universally, whether in Seneca Falls, Tiananmen Square, or in today's Syria. On a personal level, there is one image of moral courage that had significant meaning for me growing up. The image is actually imprinted in my mind. It's the photo taken of John Carlos and Tommie Smith at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, at the height of the Black Power movement. This was a powerful image for a 14-year-old Jewish boy growing up in Philadelphia. Moral courage is a relatively new term. Scholars have noted that it didn't appear in the Oxford English Dictionary until the 19th century. But since the days of Socrates, men and women have dared to show the courage of their convictions. It is hard to conceive of moral courage without appropriating the standing metaphor. We stand on principle. We stand firm. Even Luther, before the Holy Roman Emperor, boldly stated, "Here I stand. I can do no other." This is the courage that speaks truth to power, as well as the courage to follow the harder right and the easier wrong. It is the courage to vote no on a weak tenure file, even if you risk being marginalized or censored by your department colleagues. Of course, some acts of moral courage risk more than just a cold shoulder. Throughout history, those who have shown the courage of their convictions have risked imprisonment, torture, even death. Indeed, some theorists have argued that in some ways it's easier to be shot at than scorned at. The courage to take a stand is often courage done alone, or at least a few against the many. It's a kind of courage that calls attention to oneself. There is another side of moral courage. This is the courage to forgive, the courage to turn the other cheek. It's the story of a mother in Minneapolis who forgave a young man of 20 who killed her 16-year-old son. That's Mary Johnson in the photo, and the man next door to her is the man who killed her son when the son was 16. Her story was featured on CBS several years ago. She started visiting him while he was in prison. Then she advocated for his parole. She made arrangements for him to get a job where she works. And then after a period of time, she made arrangements to have him live in the apartment next to her. It's the courage of the Amish. And for most of us, Nelson Mandela stands as a paradigmatic example of this kind of courage, both when he was in prison and certainly his courage to forgive his transgressors when he was freed from Robben Island and began to lead the people of South Africa. Mandela's courage to turn the other cheek remains all too rare in our world today. Think of the bloody war in Rwanda between the Tutsis and the Hutus, or the stories just this week of ethnic cleansing in Burma between the majority Buddhists and the minority Muslims. From neuroscientific research, we know that we plan and we seek revenge using the same neural hardware that we use to satisfy a desire, such as a desire for food or sex or power. In other words, revenge pays neurochemical dividends for us. Shakespeare understood this insight way before we ever invented an fMRI machine. When asked what he would do with a pound of Antonio's flesh, Shylock responds by saying he might use the flesh to bait fish. And then he adds, if it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. Revenge is a built-in feature of our human nature. From an evolutionary perspective, the primal, instinctive, you hit me, I'll hit you back, response has helped our ancestors thrive. The revenge response is a key building block to forming a culture of honor that Richard Lovelace talked about when he talked about honor for the soldier. But allow me to suggest that the capacity to forgive is also an intrinsic feature of human nature. While we first learned the mechanisms of forgiveness within the context of family and kin, we use these same mechanisms to forgive a bitter enemy or someone who has killed our son, daughter, brother, or sister. Mandela talked about this form of courage when he was released from prison. He told reporters that he still had anger inside of him for some of the guards, but especially for one of the wardens. And yes, during the first weeks of his freedom, he felt the deep emotions of hate, even revenge. But then he told reporters they had me for 27 years. That is long enough. I don't want them to have me for another 27, he said. I have to find a way to let my anger go. That's the courage to forgive. Let us move on to the final type of courage, personal courage. Once again, I want to suggest that there are two kinds of personal courage. The first kind I call the courage to be, following Paul Tillich's book of the same title. This is the courage undergirding the It Gets Better campaign, as well as the courage of Bangladesh women to start a business, or the courage it took for Jean Vanier, born into a world of wealth and aristocracy, to dedicate his life to working with mentally challenged children and adults, first in France and now around the world. Writing in the 1950s, Tillich argued that the courage to be is the courage to affirm one's essential identity, one's inner aim or telos. Often this is the courage to take off the mask that we've been told to wear. It's the courage to fiercely ask, who am I? Or as my intellectual mentor, Alistair McIntyre might put it, it is the courage to create a life, to embed oneself in a set of practices, a set of beliefs, that for that individual has narrative meaning, narrative unity. The courage to be is also the courage to step outside one's comfort zone, even in the face of fear or doubt or alienation. But there's a second kind of personal courage, and that is the courage to change. These are the stories of those who face inner battles, those in 12-step programs, for example. In many ways, this is the most difficult courage of all, because there is no one standing to your left or your right. You are alone. To capture this kind of courage, let's watch a scene from the 1998 film American History X. The character is played by Edward Norton, is a young skinhead, a violent white supremacist who was in prison for viciously killing two black men who were trying to steal his car. In this scene, which is toward the end of the movie, Norton has just been raped in prison by a group of white supremacists, men who were initially his allies, but then they turned on him because he dared to befriend a black inmate. Here he's talking to one of his former high school teachers, someone who visits with him on a regular basis.
Right now, your anger is consuming you. Your anger is shutting down the brain God gave you.
You know, man, you've been talking about what's going on in me since I was in high school. How the fuck do you know so much about what's going on inside me?
You know, I know about me. I know about this place. I know about the place you are in.
What do you know about the place I'm in?
There was a moment I used to blame everything and everyone for all the pain and suffering and vile things that happened to me, that I saw happen to my people. Just blame everybody, blame white people, blame society, blame God. I didn't get no answers because I was asking the wrong questions. You have to ask the right question.
What?
Has anything you've done made your life better?
get me out of here, you know? I'm up in 4 months working. Put in the work.
Oh, yeah. So you're out there living?
I don't want to fuck up my family anymore. I'll go as far away as I can.
That's not good enough. You want my help? You gotta do better than that. My help is not unconditional. But running just ain't good enough.
From that moment in the movie, we witness the transformation of Norton's character. The movie becomes about his courage to change. As I shared with you already, before I was invited to serve as director of the Oskin Institute, I had not focused particular attention on the virtue of courage. But while researching the literature, I had one of those eureka moments that only an academic might really be able to appreciate. I discovered for myself, or at least for myself, I should say, something that might undergird, hold together each of the 6 narratives that we've been talking about. A kind of love. So for this, physical courage, it's the love of country, of cause, of comrade. This is the love that Richard Lovelace wrote about in his Lucasta poem. It's the love that Nathan Hale expressed when he told the British that his only regret was that he had only one life to give for his country. It's the love that James McPherson writes in his powerful book, For Cause and Comrades, Why Men Fought in the Civil War. And looking at the narratives of taking a stand and the courage to forgive, undergirding that moral courage is the love of justice and mercy. Martin Luther King called this the love that does justice. We know that King struggled with the fidelity to this love. His collections of sermons, Strength to Love, describes how difficult it was for him to resist the hate and violence that was all around him. And for the narratives around personal courage, it's the love of purpose and meaning. This is the love that Viktor Frankl writes about after experiencing the horrors of the Holocaust. It is the love that Frankl discovered in the midst of his suffering. To Frankl, purpose and meaning were pure gifts of love. Does anybody have any question about these 6 narratives on courage? Physical courage, the courage to attack, the courage to endure. Moral courage, the courage to take a stand, the courage to turn the cheek, to forgive, or the courage to be, or the courage to change. Does anybody have any questions on those 6 narratives? The love that might be undergirding those 6? Yes.
You talked to me once about the courage to ask questions.
Yes. That's a great question. I think the courage to ask great questions is the courage to take a stand. It's the courage to ask questions in the right way, at the right time, to the right person, for the right reasons, to paraphrase Aristotle. But it really is moral courage. It's so much easier just to stay silent. So I think it's moral courage. Okay. I'd like to, there's always a part of me when you come to these talks, and you're walking out, you're walking back up, and somebody says, oh, where were you? I was just at a talk. Oh, what was it about? Courage. And so did he define what courage is? So that's what I want to do right now. So I want to share with you that there are 3 dimensions to courage. The first dimension is a willingness to pursue. And this willingness to pursue is really what the Greeks talked about, is what Plato, especially Aristotle, talked about in terms of that courage is really reason. Courage really is this firmness of mind, but the key word there is mind, is what Aquinas would say, that you've thought through, this is the right step to take. That's the first dimension, is a willingness to pursue. The second is a noble goal or purpose, and I think this is what's often not included when we talk about courage. It's so important, whether it's the goal is justice, whether the goal is compassion, or whether the goal is to be the best father I can be, the best soldier I can be. It's really important to look always at courage through this lens of a noble goal or purpose. And last, this is what we always think about in terms of courage, is that it's despite some level of risk, some danger, some fear, whether the risk is to a physical, or whether it really is to one's reputation, or whether there's really fear going on in the situation. These are the three sort of components, the three dimensions. There's a calculus going on here. So there are times, let's say, for instance, anybody remembers the story of the person in the subway station who saw someone falling into the tracks, and immediately the train was approaching. That man, he was a construction worker, he didn't have a whole lot of time to pursue, a willingness to pursue. There wasn't a lot of reason going on, but there was certainly a lot of goal and a lot of risk, danger. I don't know, it was so done so quickly, I'm not even sure whether it was fear. And other times we know that a willingness to pursue. I have friends who are deploying to Afghanistan. I know Colonel McDonald is in the house, so to speak, right here, and that this deployment, this notion that you're not going over to Afghanistan for 6 months, is this willingness to pursue. So again, it's a calculus going on between how you measure this level of courage. And there's no one in the world that I know of who is really looking at sort of trying to understand what's a level 10 or what's 4 when it comes to courage. But that could be a research area that we look at. But from an Aristotelian understanding of the golden mean, those who are in my values seminars class with Professor Ward will know that, there's this notion of excess and deficiency. And deficiency here is the timidity and cowardice. And we all can have examples of that, maybe even in our own lives. And on the other side is this excess, what Aristotle would call the rashness or the foolhardiness. But there's also one more. I call that the bank robber courage. Because it's very, very easy to see that a bank robber has tremendous courage in terms of planning the robbery, in terms of the fear and the danger, but where's the noble goal? So often our courage is misplaced. So this is kind of how I'm looking at the definition of courage. Any questions about that? Yes.
So does courage can be learned?
I'm going to get back to that in just a second, because I do really believe it can be learned, and I want to explain a little bit how it's going to be learned in the next section of the talk. Anything else? That's a great question.
Some of the stuff with like the bank robber, I mean, I guess there's courage where some of it's just self-preservation, as opposed to doing stuff that's courage or bravery for the greater good or for the community or the city-state or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at what he did a courageous thing, what was it? Just his own personal self-preservation?
Yeah.
To save his own life? Or
Yeah, and that's what I mean, is the goal or purpose. Of course, we have that selfish gene, so where does that play out in terms of the stories, the narratives that we hear about going through cancer, so to speak, or any other illness, the courage to overcome that. I want to say there's great risk, danger, and certainly a willingness to pursue, but where is the noble purpose, the noble goal? And so I'm saying the other regarding is one area where I think courage really, we need to do a little bit more work in understanding that, the sense of the other as opposed to that self-preservation. When I first came across this definition, I was in a class with Professor Widener, and one of his students talked about something that he was doing. And I ended up dedicating the talk to him at Zach. Where are you, Zach? I know you're here. Would you mind coming here for just a second?
Sure.
Yeah, would you come up?
Absolutely.
I met Zach in sixth class, and he told me that he had watched, what was the show again?
Just a new show.
Oh, you don't want to say which one, huh? And it was about donating a kidney. And I had just done this. And he told us in class that he was going to do this. And so he's donating a kidney. He thought initially it was going to be over winter break, but he's not donating it to a brother or sister. he's just donating one of his kidneys. And, but now it's not going to happen over winter break. It's going to happen after spring semester. But could I ask you just to kind of go with me through this with me? Willingness to pursue. Do you have a resolve? When did you make the commitment? You have this firmness of mind. Tell us about your willingness to pursue.
It was about a year ago that I kind of stumbled upon what's called altruistic kidney donation. And from there, as I'm sure anyone can imagine, I've faced pretty much every setback known to man. Perhaps that's Murphy's Law. But along the way, I think that's the most important thing when you have something that you find you can really connect with on a personal level. I'm sure you can agree with me on this, Dr. Schwartz, that when you find something and there's an instant connection, there's almost no thinking about it. But then when you go beyond that, beyond just that immediate resolve and belief, that's really what the willingness to pursue is that you start to rationalize it and think about it and face those critiques, and you're still willing to pursue.
Why kidney? Why that purpose goal, that noble goal or purpose? Why that particular one?
I think one of the biggest things is that there are so few other options. As I'm sure some people know, people who have kidney failure can go on dialysis, but it's a very constrained living. This is something where you really are giving someone a complete change of life, and it's also one that is not often known about. I really didn't know much about kidney disease till doing research on my own, so I'm hoping to do it in a twofold sense that I can donate my own kidney, but also raise awareness like I am right now.
Emotions, danger, fear, risk. What are you experiencing?
Pretty much all of those right now. Obviously, every step along the way, there's always considerations. It is a major surgery. I won't fool anyone on that. But really, there's a lot more fear than my own personal safety, but those of everyone else. The other person going under surgery, the other people who won't be receiving a kidney on the waiting list. It's one of those things that when you start to break down the issue, there's so many more factors in play than you initially might think that the fear can be overwhelming. But again, if we go back to willingness to pursue it, we can kind of combine those, synergize those, and realize that willingness to pursue keeps us going through that fear, and we can use that as a strength.
This is where you're going to the center to give anything else you want to share about your decision? And
I guess the final thing is just that I ask everyone, if you are at all interested, either for yourself or for someone else you know, to check out Prosciutto's website. They have fantastic information on kidney donation in general. It is a big commitment, but again, I just appreciate so much Dr. Schwartz for letting me speak a little bit about this. It's a relatively unknown issue except for those who have been affected by it. So if you're interested, please check it out. Just learn a little information, and thank you so much.
One thing, courage is contagious. Just so you know that. We know that from the military. We know that from a number of different levels, but I think we're feeling it right now. Thank you, Zach. So I'd like to end by, any psychology majors or minors in the audience? I want to, well, you're teaching, you're not, okay, Lena, Kevin, I didn't know, you minor in psychology? That's your major?
Yeah, I'm physical therapy.
Oh, physical therapy, okay, fantastic. So I'm trained, at the intersection of philosophy and psychology, so I could not end this talk without talking about what I want to suggest is the courageous mindset. And so this courageous mindset is made up of different factors, and the first is positive traits. And so the question you get all the time is around courage is, well, some people are just born that way. Nick Hadges, he's just a man of courage. And yeah, there are some of us, if you just look at the big five in terms of conscientiousness or openness to experience, or if you look at some of the work on altruism or empathy, that there are some of us who are just more empathic. So clearly positive traits plays a role in the courageous mindset. Then there are the positive emotions. This is the work done in the lab of Barbara Fredrickson, somebody who I know through positive psychology. So what are the emotions? We haven't even talked about emotions yet. We've been hearing all about this reason stuff, but what are the emotions driving, producing at times, courage? What are some of these emotions that we know so well? Anyone? Just give me one.
You said you talked about
I
love.
talked about a lot of them. Boy, Schwartz, I didn't know you with your hair up. I didn't recognize you. Mama, love is one emotion. Other emotions. How about disgust? How about anger, rage? These are all emotions that somehow drive us. Janelle?
Self-preservation.
So getting back to Colonel McDonald's notion of self-preservation, I'm not sure that's an emotion, but yeah, this whole notion of preserving yourself, I'm not sure what emotion that is. Yeah, disgust, fear, shame. Jordan?
Emotion of awe.
And awe, exactly. That's a wonderful one, very rare. So emotions play a really big role in this notion of the courageous mindset. This is my own research in goals and values identity. You know, I like studying 18-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 21-year-olds and trying to ask them what values, what goals they really have and how that helps shape their identity, what I call moral identity. So sometimes it's this commitment to justice, other times it's a commitment to care and concern for those less fortunate. Other times it's just wanting to be, again, outside of adolescence, the best parent we can be. This is who we are. And this is what the soldiers do so well. This is their identity. It's just who they are. I've had the privilege of meeting 2 Medal of Honor winners independently. And both times sitting down once at lunch and once at dinner, both times they said to me, we were trained to do this. We were just trained to do it. Anybody else in this room, there were other officers in the room, anybody else would have done it. We were trained to do this. So this is the identity of the soldier, but it's also the identity of a parent or a first responder or someone who cares deeply about justice in the world. This is positive states. This is the research of Bandura, self-efficacy. This is the work of DC and Ryan on self-determination theory. This is our mind saying, I can do this. That's self-efficacy. Or if we're together in a group, we can do this. Or, like the phalanx over here, we've been trained to do this. These states are really, really important when we determine whether or not we're going to produce courage or not. Very, very important. One of the ones of positive states that I've been working on is what I call the goal efficacy. I made a promise to you, Dan, that I'm going to do this. And I think that's also part of what goes on in terms of the courageous mindset. But there are things that go on in terms of producing courage that are outside of us. The social forces. Again, looking at the military example, what is this notion, Colonel, what is this notion of do not leave a comrade behind? Wow, that's such a social force that binds us together, that sends us signals, stories about how we are. So I can talk much more about social forces, but of course not all are positive. Some social forces are negative. And last, and probably the most important, is the situation. In terms of the courageous mindset, the situation matters. Context is the critical factor in the production of courage. Each situation we're in has a particular set of stimuli that primes a distinct part of our personality structure. Certain situations activate or produce the courage we need, and certain situations rob us of courage. We succumb to fear, peer pressure, groupthink, obedience to authority. We lack the confidence or the competence, or we just really see so clearly what's going to be negative consequences. So we get paralyzed. Sometimes it's because of conflicting values. At the Air Force Academy, it's always between the value of loyalty to friend versus being honest. Solomon Asch, Phil Zimbardo, Stanley Milgram, they remind us that much of our behavior in the research lab, much of our behavior does not stem from our inner core, but it's situation dependent. So I'd like to end this section by suggesting to you or sort of a model of the courageous mindset. And that model begins with this personality structure that consists of the internal, the positive traits, the positive emotions, the positive states, as well as external resources such as the group or the situation. Courage occurs when these resources are primed by our particular situation. An example I want to give here, and it has a lot to do with learning courage, is the Flight 93. The men and women who got on that flight the morning did not say, oh boy, today's my day of courage. I'm ready. But something was activated. Something occurred in that situation which allowed them, something was primed, which allowed them to show courage, to activate those emotions, to activate those states. We can do this, even though they hadn't been trained. But I do want to suggest, in answer to Isaac's question, that if we have repeated training to these situations, that we can create stable, courage when needed responses. We can train for courage. If this, then that. This is what they do in the military. If this, then that. So the next time somebody says an anti-gay remark and you don't say anything, well, the situation wasn't primed for you to act courageously. But if you practice what to say, you'll have that state. I'm ready to do it. So I really believe we can train for courage. The military does it, and those of who, I don't see anybody in my LLC class. Is anybody? Janelle, I'm so sorry. This is the courage of the Freedom Riders. When they were trained to act nonviolently, this is training for courage. I believe it can be done. Does anybody have any questions about the courageous mindset?
Yes. I have a question. I just know one thing, that despite the training, they still have studies that even with soldiers with all the training, they have their firefighter go back and check. So they have a certain percentage of them wanting to shoot their weapon, and they realize that they shoot their weapon. So even with training, there's still that internal, despite the training, there's a certain percentage that they just, for whatever reason, go back and check, and there's a certain percentage wanting to shoot their weapon.
And in James McPherson's book, For Cause and Comrades, he said 50% of both North and South men, because of that fear, turned the other way.
Despite the training.
Despite the training. So fear, the situation and fear is a powerful disenabler.
Well, would you categorize that as a lack of courage or simply an example of moral courage? And that they felt that the conflict they were engaged in was unjust, and so they
Oh no, I don't think it was an unjust situation. I think
Someone
it was just
probably thought they were, and they just didn't realize.
I think it's just fear. I'm not, if they were going to stand and say this is an unjust war, that's different. But I think this was just they succumbed to fear. And I don't know what I would do in that situation, so I don't want to pass judgment. But I know I would want to be trained. I know I would want to have the efficacy that I have the tools that I need to get this done. Because of time, I need to go on to the very final. I've been waiting to use this image. You don't know how long. Sweetheart, you know how long. We love our Star Trek, especially the Next Generation. And I want to end by asking you to join me in a thought experiment, because I want to go where no one has gone before. Let's imagine for the last few minutes, 10 years from now, how Widener University can transform itself to become known worldwide for our programs on courage. What would that mean? So first, I thought about a clearinghouse, that we could become a repository of all things courage. We could work with students and graduate students and sort of just gather and collect all the sort of the history of courage in terms of literature, in terms of current research empirically, in terms of philosophy, narratives, prison narratives, anything that looked at courage. We could become that online repository. We could then post new research about courage. We could also bring scholars together here at Widener and then create a symposium and then proceedings out of that symposium. Under research, there is little research on the courage to forgive. There's less research about what I call courage prodigies, sort of the Ruby Bridges, or the young girl in Pakistan who simply was shot by the Taliban. Why? Because she had this thirst to receive an education so she could go on to medical school. What is going on in that young person that we could understand more about courage among the very young? understand kind of the building blocks of courage, going into a room late at night for a young child or jumping into a pool for the first time. And of course, there's so much more to learn about training for courage. We could create a dissertation prize on somebody who writes something around the world on a theme related to courage. We could have a publication prize for somebody who writes anything on courage and bring him or her to campus. We could offer a Courage to Forgive prize, somebody who has demonstrated courage like Mrs. Johnson in Minneapolis, and bring her to campus and hear her story. What would it mean like to bring courage to Widener? What would it mean for the common experience to be woven around courage? Can we imagine a future together where Widener graduates don't just have the know-how, but they also have the will too? What about bringing courage to the charter school? These are some of my ideas in terms of just nascent ruminations on where we could build a program of courage across the university. I want to conclude by saying that someone trained in philosophy, and I know that Professor Ward would know this, I could lose my license if I didn't bring us back to Plato. In one of his most famous dialogues, Plato has Socrates end a discussion on courage by admitting that he does not know what courage really is. He writes, this is Plato, "Somehow or other she has slipped away from me, and I cannot get hold of her or tell her nature. My sense is that over 2,000 years later, we still do not know the essence of courage. The virtue remains a mystery, yet one worthy of our scholarly and empirical attention. I hope my talk today has at the very least set a high bar, a standard for what courage is. It has to be something more than just sticking to a diet for 3 days. Following the Greeks, I don't think we want our courage to come too easy, except perhaps on Memorial Day. As our search comes to a pause, some final stepping stones for us to consider. Courage is about looking at ourselves in the mirror. Who do we want to be? It's a verb. It helps us get to where we want to go. It brings out the best in us. When I heard Rula Safar yesterday talk in the nursing building, it wasn't the moral courage that grabbed me, though that is replete with that. It was that this experience in Bahrain has brought out the best in her. And I spoke to her about it, and she agreed. Courage brings out the best in us. And at some level that I still don't fully understand, courage is about love. It's an attachment, a yearning, a desire for something that extends beyond our radically autonomous selves. Courage belongs to those who have something to lose and who care deeply about losing it. It's about love of country. It's the love that does justice, and it's the love that gives meaning and purpose to our lives. As Gandhi put it, a coward is incapable of exhibiting love. Love, he writes, love is the prerogative of the brave. Thank you. Questions? I think there's supposed to be a student with a microphone somewhere. Okay, yes?
Yes. This is, I'm asking you to react as opposed to answer a question. However you and I may differ in terms of definitions throughout the presentation, I myself find from a deeply moral place in my own self that the idea that you can train for courage is both intellectually and morally objectionable. Because my understanding of courage, and I thought you were covering some of this, is that it comes from a volitional place in human nature where one makes a conscious choice to take action, make a decision, follow a path, because it's consistent with one's moral nature to do so, however one might define that. And for one to train is to remove the element of moral choice. And so courage is no longer courage, but obedience. See, to me, training implies obedience, and courage implies something else. So I wonder if you could react to that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've been really influenced by a woman named Mary Gentile, who currently serves as the Widener visiting scholar here at Widener. And she wrote a book called Giving Voice to Values. And I believe that volition that you're talking about, that voice can get buried real deep, real fast. We need to rehearse what we want to say. We need to rehearse, we need to have scripts, we need to practice, we need to find strategies where we can give voice to our values. So I agree with you about the volition part, but I do think we can, maybe the word is not train, maybe that is too harsh, too strong of a term, but I do think we need to practice to be the kind of moral person that we want to be. I don't think it's just something that I want to be this way in terms of my identity, and therefore it's a commitment, and now I have the resolve. I think practice, I think creating scenarios helps us to experience that courage. But I understand where you're coming from, but I certainly don't want to say that it's a kind of training that becomes obedience. It's a training that becomes a freeing up so I can become the person I want to be. That's how I look at it, but I do understand.
I guess I see training and freeing as diametrically opposed conditions.
It's a great question. I appreciate that. Sir?
In the system here, would you consider courage to be an input or an outcome?
Oh, it's always an outcome. It's a courageous act. I could think courage, but I have to do courage. It's a verb.
You know, you talk about the noble cause, and I wonder, is that politically neutral? I think, Mary over here said, well, what if, in the face of battle, I decide this is really I don't want to go kill. Or the competing political nature of I'll defend my country or I don't want to go kill. So is that whole element politically neutral in your scheme?
We understand. Hold on, why are you asking such hard questions, Dr. Silver? Dean Silver, excuse me. Well, first off, I will say, having been at the Air Force Academy, I came up with the whole idea of the courage to ask questions because I didn't see a lot of that at the Air Force Academy. So I do think that there is a sense of that you are trained to think a certain way and that can have hazards to it. So it comes back to identity in terms of what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to ask the kind of questions that may get me to that edge of being ostracized? And in that way, I do think that there is this tension because the social forces are so powerful wherever we are, whether we're in Afghanistan or we're in that sorority or fraternity house right there. The pressure to conform is pretty powerful. So where do we have the courage to ask the kind of questions that says, this is who I am? Whether it could be, this is who I am a patriotic person who's willing to die for my country, or this is who I am, this is an immoral war, I need to get out. John?
I would say that the timing of that question matters. If you say, I'm willing to fight, and you get there and you say, because I could get hurt, then you've made the choice at the wrong time. So,
is it self-preservation, or is it because of your greater belief?
Right. If you strongly believe that something is wrong, then it's always wrong. And once you're in physical or moral or personal danger, that's not the time to make the decision. You should have come up with that earlier.
I did say it was a fuzzy construct. Sir?
One of the issues I have is we have in many of our cities situations where young people are not really applying themselves to the extent that they should be. And they need to have a shift, a complete shift in the opposite direction. And it comes back to the old adage, how can someone love who has never been loved? And how do we change that person so that he is showing leadership, courage, compassion, and all these things that he needs in order to have a fruitful life.
Yeah. Annalisa and I talked about that when we were discussing the Beloved, the novel by Toni Morrison, and it's a wonderful question. That was my area of work for a while, so I don't think we're fixed in any way as a human nature. I think we can grow up without love and then find love. How you do that, I think it does take others. I think to do that radically alone is, some may, most can't. So I think we need to surround that person in some way and provide her with that moment of love that you're talking about. But it's vitally important. When I was talking about love and the attachment, I knew I was thinking about attachment theory and the importance of that for courage. So it's a deep question that you're asking, but I think it has to do with finding attachment to someone else and finding a care provider who can be that bridge. Yes, and then Brad, I know you had your hand.
Dr. Schwartz, one more question that we probably ought to
Go ahead.
I've noticed that some people, a lot of people who've shown amazing courage in their life have not been rewarded by society. Like our veterans, like Eldridge Cleaver, he showed amazing courage many times, but he died alone. Other people who've stood up for, like somebody who was fighting for justice have black people in the police force in Boston, now they're not even getting their pension. So it just feels to me that society can be very unjust, and if we really are going to look for courage, then we should look for something universal. So anything that the Oskin Leadership Institute wants to do, I think we should really take advantage of all our international contacts and make something that's really international. Like the University of Maryland, for instance, is all around the world with the armed forces. So maybe it's possible to do something with them in other countries too.
Yeah, I try to get at the loneliness of moral courage, the isolation of moral courage. There's so many examples of that. There are so many organizations, I had it deleted from the presentation, but the Carnegie has a program called Carnegie Heroes Awards, and it's for men and women, mostly first responders, others who have really, non-military, who have helped others. Usually it's around physical courage, but there's nothing around moral courage, as you suggest. It's a very lonely type of courage. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I have to go shopping for kids at 2 o'clock.